Parents secretly drained my trust fund to cover my sister's modeling career. So, yeah, here I am, stuck in the middle of some drama I never thought I'd have to deal with. Let me just start by saying that family stuff has always been complicated with us. I'm Sam, I'm 26, and I've always kind of been the responsible one. You know, the one who worked hard in school, went straight to college, and landed a steady job. I even took on my own student loans and paid off a chunk of them already. I'm trying to make something of myself, all right? A few months ago, my aunt passed away. She was someone I was really close to, like a second mom. She'd been there through a lot of tough times, and when she passed, it hit hard. But she'd left me something, a $20,000 inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but to me, it was huge. I had big plans for it too, like paying down more of my loans or maybe even starting a little side business I'd been dreaming about. This was my shot at getting a step ahead, finally doing something for me. I knew my parents had some access to my accounts, mostly because they helped me out a bit when I first started college. You know, just in case there was an emergency or if I needed quick financial help. But recently, they hadn't been involved in my finances at all. At least, that's what I thought. So I log into my account one day, just to check everything's fine and that I'm on track with my savings. I'm the type who likes to see things laid out, you know? Seeing those numbers, knowing I'm making progress, it's satisfying. But as soon as I log in, I notice something weird. My balance is way lower than it should be, like really low. I start clicking through the transactions, heart pounding, trying to figure out what happened. Did I make a mistake? Did I forget about some big purchase? But then I see it. A massive withdrawal for nearly the whole amount of my inheritance. $20,000, just gone, and the name on the transaction wasn't mine. It was Lauren's, my younger sister. Now, Lauren, she's a whole thing on her own. She's 23, and since high school, my parents have treated her like she's God's gift to the family. It's always been, oh, Lauren's so talented, Lauren's going to make it big someday. The latest goal of hers is modeling, which, don't get me wrong, is great if you're serious about it. But she's barely made any effort. She's been pursuing it for about a year now, and it's been one failed audition after another. She's been floating from one thing to another, all funded by my parents. Anyway, I see this withdrawal, and I'm fuming. I mean, $20,000 isn't just pocket change. It's everything I'd saved and inherited from my aunt. And my parents had the audacity to pull it all out for Lauren, without a single word to me. No warning, no heads up, nothing. I call my mom right away, barely able to keep my voice steady, and ask her point blank if she knows anything about the missing money. At first, she plays dumb, all, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, honey." But after a few minutes, she gives in and says, "Well, we thought you'd be okay with it. Lauren needed a boost, something to help her get her career started. She needs to look the part, you know? And it's family money, after all." Family money? I almost lost it. This was my inheritance, left to me by my aunt specifically, and they just took it, like they had some right to decide what it should be spent on. I start trying to explain to her why this isn't okay, how I had plans for that money, but she just cuts me off and says, "Sam, don't be selfish. Lauren just needs a little help getting started, and it's not like you're struggling or anything." Selfish. She called me selfish for wanting to keep the money my aunt left for me, that I had planned to use for my future. Also, Lauren could have a few designer bags and outfits to look more professional. Like somehow carrying a Gucci bag would make her magically start booking jobs. I was in shock, honestly. And the worst part, my mom genuinely couldn't see why I was so upset. I tried calling my dad next, hoping he'd understand, maybe be a bit more reasonable. But nope, he was on the exact same page. He went on about how Lauren has potential and that she just needs some help getting her foot in the door. He actually said, "Come on, Sam, this is family. Family supports each other." That was it for me. I felt this whole mix of emotions: anger, hurt, betrayal. They hadn't even asked me. They just assumed it was okay to spend my entire inheritance to boost Lauren's so-called career. And they both acted like I was being the unreasonable one here, like I was causing the problem for daring to get upset. After those calls, I just sat there staring at my account balance, trying to make sense of it. I kept thinking, this can't be real, right? My own parents wouldn't just steal from me, would they? But the empty balance didn't lie. I was wiped out, and they didn't care. It felt like a slap in the face, honestly. All those years of being the responsible one, the one who worked hard and took care of myself, and here I was, completely taken advantage of by the people who were supposed to support me. And for what? So Lauren could play dress up and keep pretending she was on the verge of becoming a superstar model? That night, I barely slept. All I could think about was how to fix this. How could I get my money back? Could I trust them ever again? They'd gone behind my back and taken away something that was mine. I felt trapped, like there was no way to make them see how messed up this was. The next day, I started looking into my options. Maybe there was something I could do to get my money back, or at least protect what I had left. Because one thing was clear, I couldn't just sit back and let them get away with this. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, respect, and the fact that they seemed to value Lauren's appearance more than my future. And if they thought I'd just let it slide, they were dead wrong. So after finding out my entire inheritance had been blown on my sister Lauren's modeling starter pack, I knew I couldn't just sit back. I was too angry, and honestly too hurt to just let it slide. I called for a family meeting. It's not usually my style. I prefer keeping the peace and avoiding drama. But this was different. This was my future they'd just thrown away on handbags and designer clothes. We arranged to meet at my parents' house. I got there early, and as I walked in, they were all just sitting there, completely casual, like nothing was wrong. My mom was chatting away with Lauren about some new modeling opportunity she'd heard about, acting like everything was totally normal. My dad was leaning back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. The whole scene was surreal, honestly, like I was the only one living in reality. I sat down, took a deep breath, and just laid it out. "I know you guys took my inheritance money," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That was supposed to be for my future, and you used it without even asking me." My mom didn't even blink. She just looked up, tilted her head a little, and said, "Sam, honey, it's not as big a deal as you're making it. Lauren needed a little help. She's trying to get her career started." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, it is a big deal. That money was supposed to be for me. Aunt left it to me for a reason. You just took it without even asking and spent it all on designer bags and clothes?" My voice was rising, and I could feel my hands shaking a bit. My dad finally looked up from his phone and decided to jump in. "Come on, Sam. It's not like we blew it on something ridiculous. Lauren needed those things to get a foot in the door. You have a stable job? You're doing fine. Lauren's trying to make something of herself." "Trying to make something of herself?" I repeated, barely keeping my frustration in check. "She hasn't booked a single job, and even if she had, it's my money. I was planning on using it to pay down my student loans or invest in something for my future, not play dress up with luxury brands for Lauren." Lauren, who had been quiet until now, finally piped up, looking offended. "Dress up? Really, Sam? This is my career you're talking about. Do you know how hard it is to break into modeling? It's about appearances, okay? You don't understand the industry." "Right," I said, gritting my teeth. "Because having a Gucci bag and a Louis Vuitton belt is the secret ticket to success in modeling, huh?" "Give me a break, Lauren. This isn't helping you book jobs. It's just making you look like you're playing a part." She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and leaned back, like I was being ridiculous. "You're so selfish, Sam. I've always been there for you. I mean, I went to your graduation. I helped you move. The least you could do is support me when I'm just starting out." "Support you?" I was in disbelief. "I've been supporting myself since college, paying my own bills and trying to make something of myself without relying on anyone else's money. You didn't even ask for help. You just took it." My mom finally raised her hand, like she was tired of the whole thing. "All right, enough, both of you. Sam, we're family, okay? Families support each other. You act like this is some kind of theft. It's not. This is an investment in Lauren's future. We raised you. We've always been there for you. And now it's your turn to give back a little." There it was, the classic guilt trip. It was like I was 15 again, being told to do chores or babysit Lauren because family helps family. But this wasn't babysitting. It was thousands of dollars, my future, and a huge betrayal of trust. I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together, and said, "Look, Mom, Dad, this isn't about me being selfish. It's about boundaries, respect, and the fact that you didn't even have the decency to ask." My dad leaned forward, looking irritated. "Boundaries? This is family. You think we're just strangers on the street? We don't need to ask permission to help your sister. You're blowing this out of proportion. Lauren needed help, and we helped her. End of story." I felt a flash of anger and hurt so intense, I almost got up and walked out right then. But I forced myself to stay seated, even though I was practically shaking. "So, that's it?" I said, barely able to keep my voice from breaking. "You don't care how this affects me? You don't care that Aunt trusted me with that money for a reason? You're just going to pretend that taking it without asking was okay?" Lauren leaned in, her arms crossed. "Sam, you're always acting like you're better than me. Just because you got some corporate job and your life is all stable, doesn't mean you can't support your family. You act like you're the only one who's had to work hard. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. Lauren, you don't even have a job. You're living off of mom and dad's support, and now, apparently, my inheritance. How am I supposed to support you when you don't even take your own career seriously? My mom gave a dramatic sigh, looking at me like I was a disappointment. Sam, we expected better from you. You've always been responsible, the level-headed one. We thought you'd understand that we're all doing this for Lauren's future, not just for some silly shopping spree. You're making it sound worse than it is. I couldn't hold back anymore. You're actually calling me irresponsible for wanting to use my own money on my own future? This was mine, and Aunt wanted it to help me, not to give Lauren a fake successful look to impress people who won't even hire her. The silence after I said that was brutal. My parents just stared at me, and Lauren looked like I'd slapped her. My dad finally stood up, straightening his shoulders. Fine, Sam. If that's how you really feel, then maybe you're right, we should have asked. But we're still not giving the money back. It's already spent, and it's for your sister's benefit. You'll get over it eventually. That was it. The final straw. They weren't even sorry. They didn't even see what they'd done as wrong. I stood up, feeling like a complete stranger in my own family. I didn't know what to say or do. I just knew I couldn't stand to be in that room any longer. I left the house, not bothering to look back or say goodbye. It felt like my entire relationship with my parents and Lauren had just crumbled. And for what? A few pieces of designer junk that my sister was going to flaunt on Instagram for a career that was going nowhere? On the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. They didn't understand or care about the damage they'd done, and I knew I couldn't just let it slide. They'd crossed a line, and this time, I was done letting it go. After that disastrous family meeting, I left my parents' house feeling completely drained. I was so angry I could barely think straight. The audacity of it all just kept running through my head. They took my inheritance, didn't ask, didn't apologize, and genuinely thought I was the one being unreasonable. I knew I had to do something, but I was still trying to figure out what. On the drive back, I kept replaying everything they'd said, wondering if I'd somehow missed some family rule, where I had to blindly hand over everything I owned. The way my mom kept throwing that family helps family line was like some kind of twisted mantra they all believed in, even when it meant just screwing me over. Every time I thought about it, I got angrier. So once I got home, I sat down and tried to think this through logically. I had this overwhelming urge to go straight to the bank and tell them about the unauthorized withdrawal, but I hesitated. My parents technically had my account info. I'd added them to my accounts when I first went off to college, thinking they'd only ever use it for emergencies. Well, clearly, they had a very different definition of an emergency than I did. I figured it was still worth a shot, so I called up the bank's customer service line and explained the situation. I told them my parents had taken money without my permission and that I wanted to report it. I could practically feel the customer service rep raising an eyebrow through the phone. She listened politely, but once I was done, she said, "Unfortunately, since they're authorized on the account, it's not considered unauthorized access." She even sounded apologetic, like she knew it was messed up but couldn't do anything about it. I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. That was it? There was nothing I could do? Just like that, they got away with $20,000, and I was supposed to just let it slide because they had authorized access. It was insane. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd basically stolen part of my future, something that was meant to help me move forward, not boost Lauren's wannabe career. I spent the rest of that day pacing around my apartment, too mad to sit still. I kept checking my phone, half expecting some apology message from my parents, like maybe they'd realized they'd crossed a line. But nope, nothing. Just radio silence. It was like they'd just erased me, like I didn't even matter as long as Lauren was happy with her stupid designer stuff. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times they'd brushed off my needs, my goals, and focused on Lauren. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern, and I'd never noticed how deep it ran until now. I started remembering all these little moments from growing up, like the time they bought Lauren a car when she turned 16, even though I'd had to work a part-time job just to save up for a used clunker. By morning, I was exhausted but more determined than ever. I knew I couldn't just sit back and accept what had happened, so I decided to confront them again. Not face-to-face this time, because I couldn't handle another round of their twisted logic. Instead, I sent a group text to my mom, dad, and Lauren. I kept it straightforward, no fluff, just laid it all out there. I texted, "I want the $20,000 back. That money was for my future and you had no right to take it. I'm giving you a chance to make this right and pay me back." It didn't take long for my mom to reply. She texted back, "Sam, we've been over this. It was for your sister. She needed it. Family helps each other. Why can't you understand that?" I was fuming. I texted back, "I do understand, but you don't just take thousands of dollars without asking and expect it to be fine. This was my inheritance. Aunt left it for me, not for Lauren's fashion show." My dad joined in, sending a message that made my blood boil. "This is just money, Sam. You'll earn more. Lauren needs our support right now. Be the bigger person here." Be the bigger person. I swear, if I had $1 for every time I'd been told to be the bigger person when it came to family, I wouldn't need that $20,000. My whole life, I'd been expected to just suck it up and be the responsible one, while Lauren got to live in some fantasy world where she was the center of the universe. Lauren, of course, chimed in next. She texted, "I'm sorry you feel this way, Sam, but modeling is really important to me. This could be my big break. I don't understand why you're so mad." I was done. There was no getting through to them. They were all completely absorbed in this idea that they could do whatever they wanted because they were family. It felt like some kind of twisted loyalty test, like I wasn't a good sibling or child unless I just let them walk all over me. But then something changed. I realized I didn't need their approval or validation. I didn't have to keep pretending this was okay just to keep the peace. So I decided to go no contact for a while. I didn't announce it, didn't send any dramatic messages. I just stopped responding. I was done engaging in their guilt trips and sob stories. They'd shown me where I stood, and for once, I was going to listen. The silence that followed was weird at first. My phone stayed quiet and I didn't hear a word from any of them. I thought they might reach out, try to apologize, or at least offer some kind of compromise, but it was like I'd been erased from the family, like they didn't even care if I was there or not. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I kept checking Lauren's social media every now and then, just to see if she'd realized how messed up this all was. But instead, I saw her flaunting her new designer stuff, posing with the bags and clothes she'd essentially stolen from me. The captions were all these fake grateful messages like feeling so blessed to chase my dreams and grateful for my family's support. It was sickening. She had zero awareness of what it had cost me. In a weird way, though, it was kind of freeing. I realized that I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their family loyalty. If they couldn't see why what they'd done was wrong, then maybe it was time to start building a life without constantly worrying about their needs over mine. For the first time, I could focus on what I wanted, what I needed, without the weight of their expectations hanging over me. I started thinking about my options again. I wasn't just going to let this go. My family might think they were untouchable, but they'd messed with the wrong person this time. I'd always been the one to keep the peace, to make sacrifices, but I was done playing that role. This time, I was going to stand up for myself, no matter what it took. And if they thought I was going to quietly fade into the background, they were about to be proven very, very wrong. After the endless arguments and guilt trips, I finally hit a wall. My family wasn't going to give back the money they took, and they didn't even see anything wrong with it. My so-called family loyalty was basically just a one-way street, and it became pretty clear that they were never going to take responsibility. It was time to get serious. I started looking into my legal options. I wasn't sure if I had any ground to stand on since they technically had access to my account, but I figured it was worth a shot. The money was legally mine, left specifically for me in my aunt's will, and that had to count for something, right? I needed someone who actually knew what they were doing, so I decided to consult a lawyer. The whole process was intimidating. I'd never even thought about hiring a lawyer before, let alone one to go against my own family. But enough was enough. I gathered all the paperwork I had on the inheritance, which honestly wasn't much, just a few bank statements showing the deposit and the details from my aunt's will. It felt so weird to be putting together evidence against my parents and sister, but there I was, collecting everything like I was some private investigator in my own life. I set up an appointment with a lawyer specializing in family and financial disputes. When I explained the situation to her, she didn't even try to hide her shock. She said, "This kind of behavior isn't uncommon in families, unfortunately." Then she added, "But that doesn't make it right. They misappropriated your inheritance, and that's something we can take legal action on." She laid out my options, and it was like a switch flipped in my head. I realized I actually had some power here, a way to hold them accountable for what they'd done. She explained that we could file a claim for misappropriation, basically making a case that they'd used the inheritance funds illegally, even if they had access to my account. Apparently, Just having access didn't mean they could take whatever they wanted. As she went over the details, I started to feel this strange sense of relief mixed with anger. I was relieved because for the first time, someone actually took me seriously. It wasn't just family drama or me overreacting like my parents kept saying. This was real, and it was wrong. So I decided to go through with it. I told her to move forward with the claim, and she warned me it could get ugly, especially since we were dealing with family. She wasn't kidding. The paperwork alone was intense, and I could already imagine the look on my parents' faces when they'd get served with it. Part of me was nervous about the fallout, but another part felt good. Like finally, I was standing up for myself. A few days later, the papers were served. And that's when the real nightmare started. My mom was the first to call. She left a voicemail because, by that point, I wasn't picking up any calls from them. The message was all over the place. Crying, ranting, saying I was tearing the family apart, that I was ungrateful and cold-hearted. She threw in that classic line, "After everything we've done for you." Like somehow giving me a roof over my head when I was a kid was supposed to cover up for the fact that they'd stolen my future. Then my dad sent a long-winded text trying to guilt-trip me into dropping everything. He said things like, "Sam, we're family. How can you treat us like criminals? We raised you better than this." It was like they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that what they'd done was wrong. They were treating me like the villain for standing up for myself, as if I was somehow betraying them just by expecting basic respect. Lauren, of course, had to chime in. She posted a passive-aggressive rant on social media about how some people only care about money and how she was disappointed that her own family couldn't support her dreams. The post was so obviously directed at me, but she didn't tag me. It was just this vague, dramatic pity party for herself, and a bunch of her friends and random people commented things like, "You deserve better, Lauren," and "Don't let the haters get you down." It was honestly pathetic, but it still stung a bit. It was like she genuinely believed she was the victim in all of this. But even with all the guilt tripping and manipulation, I was determined not to back down. My lawyer had warned me it would get tough, and I was ready to see it through. I had no idea how they'd handle the legal stuff on their end, but I knew they couldn't just ignore it. They were going to have to answer for what they'd done, one way or another. The first hearing was intense. I didn't even look at my parents as I walked in. I kept my eyes forward, sitting with my lawyer who had this calm, focused energy that actually helped me feel a bit more confident. My parents, on the other hand, looked a mess. Angry, nervous, and to be honest, a bit desperate. They tried to argue that it was family money, and that they'd only borrowed it to help Lauren. But my lawyer shut that down fast, explaining that the inheritance was legally and explicitly mine, and that they'd had no right to take it without my permission. It was almost satisfying to see their expressions change as they realized they couldn't just talk their way out of it this time. This wasn't a family dinner where they could guilt-trip me into silence. This was real, and they were being held accountable. Throughout the hearing, my mom kept looking over at me, like she expected me to break down and apologize or something. My dad looked furious, and I could tell he wanted to say something, but he kept quiet, probably because his lawyer advised him not to talk. The tension in the room was insane. It felt like years of unresolved issues and resentment all boiling to the surface. But this time, I wasn't backing down. The judge heard everything, from the fact that they'd accessed my account without permission to the details of how they'd spent the money. It was brutal, but seeing it all laid out like that, I realized just how ridiculous the whole thing was. They had taken $20,000 meant for my future to fund some fantasy they had about Lauren's modeling career, and they thought they could just brush it under the rug. By the time we left the hearing, I could see the reality starting to hit them. They couldn't brush this off anymore. My lawyer said it would take a few more sessions to wrap everything up, but she felt confident we'd get a favorable outcome. And honestly, that was enough for me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had some control over my own future. My family had always made me feel like I was just there to support them, that my needs didn't matter as long as Lauren was taken care of. But here I was, finally standing up for myself, and it felt powerful. I knew the fallout wasn't over yet, and that things might get even uglier. But I also knew that I wasn't the same person who'd sit there and take it. Not anymore. This time I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until I got what I deserved. So the final court session came around. And honestly, by that point, I just wanted this whole thing to be over. It felt like months of my life had been swallowed up by stress and drama, and I was beyond ready to move on. I walked into the courthouse feeling like this was the last hurdle, And no matter what happened, I was prepared to end things with my family. No regrets. My parents looked rough. They'd clearly been through it, and seeing them like that would have bothered me a few months ago. But now, after all the manipulation, the guilt trips, and the complete lack of remorse, I felt nothing. I was just numb. They had put me through hell and turned everyone against me over money that wasn't even theirs. The hearing itself was pretty straightforward. The judge reviewed all the evidence, which my lawyer had organized neatly, laying out every single time they'd accessed my account, every single cent they'd spent on Lauren's career. It was all there in black and white. Bank statements, receipts, my aunt's will, all of it. The judge didn't look too impressed with their "it's family money" defense, especially after hearing how they'd basically gaslit me into silence when I first confronted them. When the ruling came, the judge sided with me. My parents were ordered to pay back the full $20,000 and slapped with a fine on top of that for misuse of funds. They looked shocked, like they genuinely hadn't expected to lose. It was honestly the first time I'd seen them actually look affected by this. My mom looked at me with this pleading expression, but I wasn't about to fall for it this time. They'd had every chance to make things right without dragging us all into court, but they chose to dig in their heels instead. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt this weird mix of relief and sadness. It's hard to explain, but I think it was because I knew deep down that my relationship with my family was over. They'd pushed me to a point where I had to choose between my own future and staying in the family, and I had finally chosen myself. It wasn't some dramatic moment where I stormed off or anything. It was just this quiet realization that I was done. Of course, my phone blew up as soon as I left the courthouse. My mom and dad tried calling, but I ignored them. They sent texts too, and let me tell you, the guilt tripping hit a whole new level. My mom's message was basically one long rant about how I'd betrayed the family and how no one is ever going to trust me again. My dad took a different approach, all about how money isn't everything, and that I'd regret this for the rest of my life. But the wildest part? Lauren actually texted me. She had the audacity to tell me that I'd ruined her dreams and that I was selfish for not wanting to see her succeed. The entitlement was unreal. Here was a person who had no problem spending my inheritance on a pile of designer junk and then somehow twisted it around like I was the bad guy. I didn't even bother responding. Over the next few days, I made a decision to go completely no contact with them. This time, for real. I blocked my parents' numbers, left every family group chat, and even blocked them on social media. I thought that cutting them off would feel heavy, but instead, it was like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I wasn't living under their expectations or constantly trying to keep everyone happy. But that didn't stop them from trying to pull me back in. My mom actually came to my apartment a couple of days later, banging on my door, demanding that I open up and talk like an adult. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, listening to her voice getting louder, until she eventually left, leaving this long, bitter voicemail about how blood is thicker than water, and how I was being selfish for abandoning the family. It was honestly pathetic, and it just confirmed that I'd made the right choice. For weeks, I kept hearing things through the grapevine. Apparently, they were struggling to pay back the money, and Lauren was furious that her career had been put on hold. She still couldn't seem to connect the dots that all of this was a direct result of her and my parents' choices. To them, I was the villain who had ruined everything, but I just kept my distance. I was done explaining myself. Eventually, things quieted down, and life just moved on. I focused on my job, put some money into a savings account that no one but me had access to, and started thinking about what I wanted for my future without them. The inheritance was supposed to be about building something for myself, and I was finally getting that chance, even if it had come in the messiest way possible. One surprising thing that happened was that a couple of extended family members reached out to check on me. My aunt, who I'd never been super close with, actually sent me a message saying she'd heard what happened and that she was proud of me for standing up for myself. It was weirdly comforting to know that not everyone in the family was on my parents' side. I think some of them knew what my parents were like, but no one had ever stood up to them until now. Looking back, I don't regret any of it. It's weird to think that this all started because I trusted my parents with my bank account. I thought they were just helping out, but they saw it as an opportunity to take advantage. It sucks, but I guess sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be the ones who will hurt you the most. In a strange way, I'm grateful. This whole mess showed me that I was never going to have the life I wanted if I kept letting them hold me back. They'd already taken so much from me. My time, my money, my peace of mind, and I wasn't about to let them take anything more. It was time to start living life on my own terms. Since cutting them off, I've started focusing on things that actually make me happy. I've picked up some hobbies I never had time for, and I've reconnected with friends who respect my boundaries. I even started seeing a therapist to help me process everything, and it's been eye-opening to say the least. I'm learning that it's okay to put myself first, that it's not selfish to protect my own future. So that's where I am now, starting fresh, with no regrets. My family may not understand, they may never apologize or see things from my perspective, but I've come to terms with that. I've finally taken control of my life, and it feels incredible. To anyone who's ever felt trapped by family expectations or guilt-tripped into sacrificing your own happiness, I'll say this: don't be afraid to set boundaries. Don't let anyone make you feel like you owe them your entire life just because they're family. Sometimes you have to choose yourself, even if it means leaving people behind. And if that makes me selfish, then fine. I'll wear it like a badge.